and everything I learned in Filipino systems, none of that worked. None of it worked. And the way it ended, Carew came up with a Motorola and cracked that dude in the head 4 or 5 times, and he stopped. So it was unsophisticated. It was visceral. It was primal.
What's the real stuff that works?
Yeah. Covered in blood. He's slippery.
Yeah. Craig Douglas spent 20 years in law enforcement with roles as a SWAT operator, SWAT Commander, and undercover narcotics detective after 10 years an Army Ranger.
If I had to say there was a moment, it would probably be that one.
He has since created a body of work that has become the industry standard for how to manage bad breath range, real-world violence, teaching around the world nearly every week of the year. Join us in this episode as we discuss these life lessons as he shares stories he's never told publicly before.
I've never actually talked about this in person with anybody, right? Except a couple of people. So I'll talk about it now because it's part of the story.
Welcome to Unbroken from the Ashes. I'm James Ash.
And I'm Jessica Ash.
And today we're here with Craig Douglas. Dude, it is so good to have you here.
Dude, it's great to be here. Just being in your house, being with you guys, it's really special, man. So I'm very, very happy to spend time with you guys.
Thank you. So a lot of our folks that listen, a lot of them are just like regular people that don't necessarily aren't involved in the combatives community. A lot of them are. A lot of them are military law enforcement, but like my mom and there's a bunch of cancer patients that watch the show that don't necessarily know who you are. Okay. So I'm going to do kind of like a formal introduction.
Sure.
You do it much better than I do. But from what I know of you, you're an Army Ranger.
I was.
Always, right?
Yeah, I guess. Nothing really identifies me. Like, that's not particularly identifying. I didn't learn very much. It was 80s era military, 86 to 89. Wasn't in war. I learned how painful an Alice Large with a bent frame is, and suffered through the Lord of the Flies of the 80s era Ranger Regiment.
That's awesome.
That's really about it, man. So I'm not one of those guys that holds on to that.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But I was.
And law enforcement, full career, you were a SWAT officer, SWAT commander, operator, did all those things. You did undercover work, which from my understanding is really what spurred a lot of what you do now. And what you do now is teaching full-time, and full-time's an understatement. You travel, 42, 46 weeks a year?
About that, yeah, between 42 and 46. That's actually right on. That's the average, between 42 and 46.
So share with folks the things that I missed.
Not really a whole lot, man. I think I had a weird intersection of unique professional experiences and a lot of time teaching a whole bunch of people in a whole bunch of different venues, a whole bunch of different stuff. And it just brought me to an intersection where through fate I was able to monetize that. There was no marketing plan for it. But,
sure.
I was Daniel LaRusso. I was the skinny kid with a birthmark getting beat up in high school, whose grandfather took him into martial arts school in 1974 against his mother's wishes, learned how to fight, and all we had was, Taekwondo back then, but it's still more than the other kids. And it was enough to stop them from bullying me, and then I became the bully and kind of devolved into juvenile delinquency and continued doing martial arts, a variety of martial arts, up until I was sent off to military school and did my last 2 years of high school and military school, went in the Army.
Okay.
And those 5 years probably realistically kept me out of prison. Came home, came into law enforcement, ended up in undercover narcotics, and it wasn't probably too much of a departure from who I was as a teenager to go back into that. So I was a really good undercover officer, made a lot of cases, had some pretty impactful experiences, and was assaulted a lot. And between my martial arts training, the reality of what happened in those assaults, and then being a teacher, even as a child and a teenager, and a defensive tactics instructor, and early on in my law enforcement career, and was for 22 years, even for a year after I retired. It kind of just brought me to a place where I created this body of work, and I didn't intentionally create a body of work as it legitimately is now. It just, it was kind of like therapy when I first started doing this. I had some pretty significant failures that almost cost me my life on a couple of occasions doing undercover work. And I had a local group of risk-tolerant young police officers who were willing to get into the weeds with me on some of these problems that I'd encountered. And then between that pool, it's about 7 or 8 guys, and just having access to the equipment and being willing to use that equipment outside of the manufacturer's recommended guidelines. So what we're talking about for the audience is basically using a product called Simunition, which is like a paintball that goes into a replica, essentially, of your service weapon. And then at the time, and still pretty much now, that product required a 3-foot standoff distance. So you couldn't do contact level pistol training. You weren't supposed to, and everybody adhered to the recommendations of the manufacturer. So we violated all that.
Sure.
We put on motorcycle helmets and took that product and got right on top of each other and fought in cars and went kind of had Fight Club. And it created this working knowledge that really didn't exist before of what contact distance shooting looked like. And then I started writing about that on some internet forums, the old V-Bulletin software, and people got interested, and they were like, hey, what about some products? Hey, what about a video? Hey, why don't you do a class here?
Right.
And I finally relented in doing an open enrollment class. And Paul Gomez, who's dead now, he was the guy that badgered me into doing this. And he badgered me for like 2 years. And the story is I was getting married for the first time. And the wedding that my first wife wanted was fairly exorbitant. And I was on the phone with Paul, and I'd gone over and worked with him with his little garage group in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he had just been on me, man, nobody's doing this like you're doing it. It's different, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really want to teach anymore than I was already teaching, because I had collateral duties at the police academy, and that's a fairly, as you know, ambivalent, disinterested population. So the thought of walking in and doing that more than I already was, where people were like, hey, what time are we getting out of here today?
Exactly. When's lunch?
First thing out of their mouth, right? As we know. Just didn't interest me. And I was complaining to Paul about, not having enough overtime for the wedding. And he said, hey, man, let me set up a few classes for you, and let's see how that works. I'm like, okay. And I did it. And I remember the first class I did, in the first ECQC class. I'd done a knife class the year previously in 2003 in California, because we had launched our custom knives. There was a knife maker, Tracer and Aldi, that was making them at the time. But this was the first gun class that I did. It was a 1-day class. And it was in Lake Charles, Louisiana, in July. It was a 1-day class. It didn't even have a name. Paul got together a group of people like, hey, this guy's coming. Who is he? He's this guy. Never heard of him. Yeah, well, it'll be good. And it's going to cost this much. And I promise you it'll be worth your time. But I drove those people for like 13 hours.
Wow.
And the coursework then was still more Fight Club. And, I understood how it worked, right? I didn't really understand the format and what would become like what people think of me and ShivWorks now.
Sure. Very polished.
Not that at the time at all. But I drove these people like 13 hours in July, Louisiana heat.
Well, they earned that class.
And they, at the end of that, I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm tired. And they were just grinning and happy and bloody and beat up and completely dehydrated. I'm like, who are these people?
These are not my officers. Yeah.
No. And it just, so I did it again. And it was the same kind of people. I did it again. I did it again. And again and again and again. And then the last 2 years at the sheriff's department, I was working during the week to make overtime because I'd burned through all my vacation and all my comp days to go teach classes.
Right.
I had 2 full-time jobs there in 10 and 11. So our sheriff, who was just toxic, the second sheriff, the sheriff I retired under, second sheriff I worked for, I knew something was coming down the pike on that guy, and it did. You know, he was removed from my office and finished out wearing an ankle bracelet. But that's another story altogether. Southern politics, you know. But and I just decided, you know what? I've got my time between the mill, you know, a little bit of unused leave, and 21 years. I can punch out with a 25-year, 50% pension and go get into something else, actually make money, and still have a little bit of check
awesome.
coming in. So that was it. So I went full time in 2011. It's 2024 now, so 13 years doing it full time, and it's turned into what it is. You know, it's been a long road. I love it still. You know, it defines me. It is my purpose.
Yes.
And I've learned a lot from it.
And I just want to stop and clarify for any of the listeners who don't know what it is that you do now.
You read my mind. I was going to do the same thing.
Go
ahead.
for it.
Yeah.
No, go for it.
So Craig is arguably the person who has spearheaded the concepts and curriculum for close quarters, clinch range weapons engagement. And you do other things too, fighting in vehicles, you know, single man, room clearing and other things like that. But really what you're known for is that clinch range engagement. And I was beginning to say earlier before we went live, I had heard of you around 2012 when I was at another department. And my reason, my why for teaching is, you know, I grew up in a pretty violent and tumultuous home and environment, and I wanted to give people teeth and claws to be able to fight back and stand up if they were ever in a situation like I was in. And I was kind of constantly looking for what's the real stuff that works.
Yeah.
And I wrestled through high school, so I was like, "Hey, this is good. I like this." And I was kind of looking for a corollary in other traditional martial arts, and I had a few experiences where I learned that all the nonsense that I learned through defensive tactics programs and things like totally failed, totally didn't work. And so I was kind of on this path to seek the real thing. From that point until 2020, I didn't have the funds or the free time to be able to come to a course.
Yeah.
And that's where we're saying, like, the online coursing that you're doing, man, that would have been a gift for James at that time.
Yep.
So for those of you that want Craig's classes but can't afford to come to an in-person one, first of all, it's worth every fucking penny. It is absolutely worth every penny. But if you can't, if you just don't have it, those online courses are a great, at least an example of what to look for, what's real. You know, I think that's an amazing place for it. And you have, whether you know it or not, have single-handedly changed the direction of how I do teaching and how I do training and how I think about these things. And as I was standing up the DT program for our department now, it's all based upon the curriculum that that I learned through you. So for those of you who don't know who Craig is, that's who you are. You teach for every branch of the military, different intelligence agencies. You're not just teaching those guys, but you're also teaching people like Jess and me
That's my preference.
very broad.
That's actually my preference.
Yeah.
My preference is regular people.
Yeah.
Over commandos or spooks or
Why is
spies or the single most common thing is the everybody's self-motivated and they want to be there. You know, we'll go into a tier 1 organization, you know, and I mean it gets no higher. And they're guys that are just ambivalent about being there. So it's like, and in an open enrollment class where people are paying their own money, I mean, I don't have to worry about motivation. Engagement, interest is high.
So I have a question related to that, the self-motivation, the drive, and driving forces. When I came to the first class in 2020, I brought a friend with me, and he had also been a lifelong martial artist, did a lot of like SWAT and things like that.
Yep.
And when faced with this very real and honest experience against true force on force, you learned a lot of it didn't work.
Yep.
You had that experience as well. When you faced that moment of, oh shit, everything I've poured into in my life up to this point, you know, martial arts, defensive tactics, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? What was that realization like?
It was a gradual thing. There were inklings of that. One of the first ones was when I was a patrol officer. I was very heavily invested for almost a decade in Southeast Asian systems, Kali slot, things like that. I think this was around 92, 93 maybe. We had a call to a medical emergency, and I get there, I pull up, and there's a kid that answers the door, and he's like, you know, I get there to the front door, and he said, he's down here. So and he runs down there, so I walk in, I take a left, I go down a long hallway, there's a master bedroom that opens up, and it's a large master bedroom with a large walk-in closet. There's a huge guy, and he's down, face down in a closet, and there's a woman that's tugging on his left arm because his head was right here. And she's crying, and she's like, get up, get up. So, it's a medical emergency call. I'm thinking, that big non-sandwich eating dude just, had a heart attack
Right, yeah.
or choked on something or whatever. So I took a knee. I was like, ma'am, here, step back, I'm going to roll him over and give him CPR. And I just got lucky, and I checked his elbow, because I was going to roll him towards me. He sprung up, and he was covered in blood. He had a 9-inch filet knife in his hand. So just my hand being on it kept me from, getting cut. And I immediately just kind of collapsed on his arm. Big dude. He tried to base up, and I had intuitive grappling at this point, a little bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but it wasn't particularly sophisticated. It was more Shuto, actually. We did a lot of lock flow and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't as positionally based as wrestling or BJJ is. And we were in that closet. I took a 2-on-1 on that blade, and big guy. He probably dressed out about 330. Wow. Big dude. And I may have been $140 at the time. Little bitty guy, skinny as shit, covered in blood. He's slippery.
Yeah.
We're in this closet. She's in there with us. I remember there's several shoe boxes fell on us, and there were these like woman's shoes that hit me in the head, and I'm like, those are ugly shoes. But just weird shit, that you think of in a second. But I fought that guy for 4 minutes, and that's a long time.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. Well, I don't know if I fought him for 4 minutes, but from the time I signed out on the radio until Bob Carew signed out, it was 4 minutes. So realistically, let's say it's a 3-minute fight.
It's a long fight.
Still, yeah, 180 seconds, right? But every strip and disarm and everything I learned in Filipino systems, none of that worked. None of it worked. And the way it ended, Carew came up with a Motorola and cracked that dude in the head 4 or 5 times, and he stopped. and we wrestled him in a pair of handcuffs. It was unsophisticated. It was visceral. It was primal. Arguably, there's some technique there, but it was mainly just me kind of riding this guy's arm like a flea, trying to keep a knife out of me. That was like one of the first ones. And there were just a number of incidences like that. And it kind of culminated in, me almost getting beat to death on a 2-ounce powder cocaine deal and shot in the face by 2 guys. I had no solution for that. And that was the one where a group of other men got in literally in the nick of time, like in a movie, and saved my life and kept me from getting shot in the face. And I think if I had to say there was a moment, it would probably be that one, right? Where you're alive definitively because of someone else's actions and someone's benevolence. You feel like a victim.
Right.
It sits with you.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't ever forget that. Now, I think you got a couple of options. You can crawl into a bottle or dope or whatever else, or stick your head in the sand, or you can try and do something with it. And I think I have enough anger in me, where between having anger and access to that equipment, I'm going to figure this out, and it's never going to happen to me again.
Yeah. So it was like Defiance.
It was. There's no doubt. It's Defiance. It was Defiance. Yeah. Don't go gently into this good night. Right.
It's one of my favorite poems.
It was read at my grandfather's funeral, so it's probably going to be read at mine too. But I love that poem. But no, I was going to figure this out. It's not going to happen. And that's how it started, So, but that was the moment. Mm-hmm. And I think I've learned how to be more diplomatic these days when dealing with things that I know absolutely don't work. But like in those early days, especially on like internet forums, man, we were ruthless in just going after bullshito.
Oh yeah.
We went after it. That's bullshit. That didn't work. You don't know that. Because the trauma was still real fresh then, right?
For sure.
So it was very real to me when people would offer opinions without experience on the internet. And everything was theory. I'm like, been there, done that, did what you do, doesn't work. Here's how it didn't work. I can tell you why. And then I started looking at it, and then all this other stuff came to light. All the environmental stuff that we figured out. How much environment plays a part in the formulation of motor tactics and strategies, and motor learning.
Yes.
All the stuff we've seen, like in the car fighting, where we take good Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts and put them in a car, and they just get demolished, which brings about the whole idea of, when you're developing a skill set in a training environment, a place explicitly set up for comfort and safety, how does the orthodoxy translate, into a different environment? And how fragile is the skill? So that's been a big one, that I've learned conceptually when creating curriculum or trying to just problem solve.
Yeah.
Is that one right there. What does the environment actually look like?
Right. There's, a couch and a hallway that's this wide.
Yep.
And you're in a crackhead kitchen.
Yep.
And you get hit in the head with a pan of hot meat.
Yep. Yep.
That was
exactly
his nickname for a while.
Hot meat.
Hot meat.
It's your street day.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a prostitute that I was trying to take out of a kitchen, and she was making ground beef on the stove and she was stirring it with a steak knife, of all things, right? And I see the steak knife, and we're in crackhead kitchen. It's this big. I don't have room to back up, and so I grab her wrist, and she flips it around like ice pick grip. And so I try to strip it, and this cheap ass knife just snaps. Yeah. And there's a little nub of it left. So it's like, that's still really dangerous. And so I've got kind of a 2-on-1 on that arm. and I start to feel her turn and twist toward me. Somehow she's going to hit me. That pan of hot meat that she grabbed with the other hand, I kind of like did like a Philly shelf kind of thing, and it glanced off my shoulder, burned the side of my face, and she took a ride. but that environment, you can't replicate that on a
And
BJJ
you had
mat.
hot meat on your head. That is the consequence. The pan missed you, but the hot meat didn't.
Yeah, the dogs loved how I smelled when I got home. But
Got lucky, man.
Yeah, truly.
You know, there's many a Southern woman that has blinded and maimed a guy with hot grits.
Yes.
Because grits are like napalm. Grits are a pissed off Southern woman, man. That's like napalm. That's just, they know.
Love it.
That's like genetic knowledge. I'll get you with these grits. They all have it.
So the resilience and the defiance that you had coming into that, where did that come from?
Trauma. And I can't, you know, the defiance came from anger, and the anger came from trauma and rejection and being bullied and, you know, fighting back finally. You know, I wish I could say there was some uplifting story that gave me resilience, but there's not. There's not. There's no self-talk or, you know, some guru that gave me resilience. There was anger. And I had a conversation here recently with someone who, close to me, said, I wish you could get rid of some of your anger. And I thought about it, and I'm like, it served me so well. You know, I think if I can manifest it, you know, positively, but man, it serves me well. I never will forget. It's funny, you know, how anger ebbs and flows. I never will forget a conversation I had. I've always been angry, but there have been levels of that, right? Levels where it's absolutely unhealthy and levels where it's healthy. Never will forget a conversation. I may have told you this story about William April. Did I tell you that story?
Perhaps. Go ahead.
So William, my good friend, deceased also, you know. That's the other thing about, you know, being over the half century, more and more of your friends are dead. But William, about 3 or 4 months after I'd retired, I'd gone over to New Orleans, have dinner with him. We're just hanging out, chatting. He's like, how you doing, man? How you feeling? I'm like, you know, I'm feeling oddly unfocused. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, unfocused. I'm not sharp. I'm fuzzy. Literally couldn't describe. Didn't have the words. I'm known for being loquacious, right?
Correct.
Didn't have the words to describe how I was feeling. And he let me just babble probably for a good 2 minutes. He said, you know what it is, don't you? I'm like, no, William, tell me. And he said, you're not angry anymore. I'm like, wow.
Interesting.
So the feeling of, you know, because I had a target on my back my entire career. I had a career-long enemy. He's dead now, too. But that guy hated me from the day I walked in the door until I retired as a captain 21 years later, and he made it progressively more difficult for me to navigate my career. And then when he couldn't pick me off, he started picking my guys off. And that was actually one of the final straws that pushed me towards retirement. I was like, yeah, you can't pick me off, but he's just going to start picking off my people. So I'm like, yeah, I'm too hot. So I left.
I got goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah.
I was a squad leader, you know, when I was in the Marines, and you can mess with me.
Yeah.
You fuck with my guys,
Yeah,
man. That's a problem.
And that was like, I gotta go. Yeah. Gotta leave. Too hot. But William said that to me, and it was literally, you know, I was knocked off my horse, you know. Well, I was Saul on the road to Damascus, you know. It was that moment where I was like, could have knocked me over with a feather. I was like, wow, he's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I wasn't as angry after retirement. You know?
I get that.
Yeah.
It's a powerful driver.
It's huge, right?
Yeah.
I think And I remember my, I've never actually talked about this in person with anybody, right? Except a couple of people. So I'll talk about it now because it's part of the story.
Okay.
My my mother, she hated how angry I was, and she always fretted over my anger. But my mother also wouldn't fight for anything, including my grandfather when his second wife ended up euthanizing him. So it's I remember that day being in the hospital, and he was probably terminally ill, but he made a decision that he wanted to try the surgery, and his wife at the time had this overarching just control over the household, and she also had power of attorney, so she basically conspired with his doctor to go against his wishes and shoot him up with morphine, which is what they did. And I remember being in the hospital, and I remember what was left of my family. My grandfather was the only other fighter. You know, he's the guy that raised me. Dad's dead. You know, wasn't a big part of my life. Stepfather, nice guy, not a fighter. Mother, not a fighter. Second wife, not a fighter. And I remember just feeling like I'm the only one, and I probably was getting ready to get snatched up by hospital security. You know, I'd faced off with she had a whole herd of white trash family in there. I'm just like 20 people. It's just me against them. You know, but I remember, I never will forget this moment. I remember my mother throwing her hands up and saying, "It's too hard," and running out. It's too hard to fight for her father's life. She didn't have the resolve. She didn't have the ability to fight because, you know, my mother wasn't really an angry person. She was just was who she was. So, and I remember the contempt I felt, you know, for her, and the resentment I felt for her. And I'm like, I'm fucking glad I'm the way I am.
Yeah.
I'm glad the way I am because I will get shit done. So, all kinds of stuff going on with that story, obviously, you know, but the circling back to the anger thing, you know, that anger and my anger has absolutely served me. It served me in creating ShivWorks. It served me in navigating current health problems. You know, it has. It drives me to take one more step. Fuck you.
Absolutely.
To whoever shaking my fist at whoever is imposing themselves on me. I'm not going to submit. So, yeah, man, I think at the end of the day, I think early exposure, I'm not saying it's healthy.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's served me well.
Absolutely.
Despite it not being a good thing.
You know, but what is good? You know,
and I'm not a moral relativist either,
Right.
right? I'm certainly and have been at times morally ambivalent. That has served me well, right, in doing what I've done in law enforcement as an undercover officer. There's no doubt.
Sure.
But I do think there's right and wrong. I know there's right and wrong. You know, spent too much time on the job, right?
Correct.
Scraped too many dead kids up. Talked to too many parents that killed them. You know, so I'm very, very aware of right and wrong, but there's right.
There's a lot of gray.
There's
in
wrong,
between.
and there's a whole lot in between. That.
Yeah.
There is. So, yeah, I guess just being more comfortable than ever with living in the gray, knowing when to take the stand. I think that's another thing with age. You know, some things just don't become as important, and so many things you're flexible on, and then the stuff that you're not, you're absolutely not. It's a hard no,
Right.
or absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
I know we haven't stayed on track.
No, this is
I don't know what
this
the
is awesome.
I don't even know what
Yeah.
the track
Yeah,
is.
this is awesome, man.
It's interesting that you're talking about, the value of anger. And we had just finished talking about, in the other room, we showed you that photo of Kilimanjaro.
Yep.
And I told you I was passing out on summit night.
Right.
And the primary driver for me getting to the top was anger. And, and I was recovering from some stuff I had been through, and I had to do it for myself. Like, almost like as an FU, like I am not giving up. I'm stronger than this. And it drove me. And it was also the same thing that drove me to, come from American version of poverty to getting a scholarship to college. Like, all these things were actually driven by anger. And so powerfully that at this point in my life, I don't have as much anger. And I'm like, yeah. So the reason I got these braids, it's not because I'm about to take a ShivWorks class and I got my fighter braids. It's because I'm leaving for Everest. And I just, it's like Saturday.
Saturday.
Are you really?
She is.
Wow.
And I just found out 2 weeks ago because considering all the things with James's diagnosis, we had decided like we can't do any trips like that, and he actually can't do something like that right now.
Yeah.
And but a friend who was going on this trip had to back out at the last minute, is losing all of their money no matter what, so they gifted it to me,
Wow.
and we're like,
Right.
how can I say no to that?
Yeah, and he's not going to let you not say. He's
Yeah.
not going to let you say no. to that.
Right.
I said, just bring my hiking poles to take a little piece of me with you.
Right. And but I'm actually looking at this like, what, I need to get angry at something because
It's interesting, right? It really is how it does give you drive. I think how do you give your kid, and you guys know this better than me because I'm not a parent, but how do you give your kid enough positive trauma so they are resilient and they have drive and they don't get run over, but not create negative generational trauma, right? I don't know, maybe if ShivWorks is my child, that's kind of probably, what I've tried to do. I think the language we use with this is we try and give people the benefit of my experiences without the consequence of it actually happening. And doing that in a safe, supportive, it's about vulnerability, not shame environment. And we've talked about Brene Brown's work and how impactful that's been on me, But I think that's the right way to do it. I don't know. I'm willing to change my mind. I'm more aware of than ever of, do I actually know what the fuck I'm talking about?
It's interesting. Tyler was talking earlier about that exact same concept.
Tyler is our son who's 17 now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he calls it the Dunning-Kruger effect. And like the more you know about something, the more you realize you still have yet to learn.
Yeah.
So you feel like less confident. Meanwhile, you're better now than you were before.
And when people just like hang on, that's another reason I'm precise generally certainly when I teach, because I'm very, very aware that people hang on to every single word I say. And I know the impact of a single word, right? So I'm always trying to make sure, I'm saying the right thing. Same thing when people commonly goes, "Hey man, you're such a good dude." I'm like, no, don't conflate me being good at something with me being good. They're two different things, right?
Yes.
And don't canonize or deify me.
That's right.
Okay, I'm a flawed human being. I'm good at this, and this is good for you, but that doesn't mean I'm good. Don't conflate the two. It's super important.
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, it is, and I'm I'm still not comfortable with it. I just try and do the right thing, right? Make sure I'm doing it in the right way. Make sure my motivations are correct. Even if I'm tired, do I want to? I need to take the time to say the right thing, to be mindful in that moment. It's good discipline. It is. It forces me. Those people, it forces me to. They do force me to be better. I will say that. I can't generate that internally. I've always needed external stuff. I wish I could be the guy that can do breath work and get into flow state, but I'm not. I'm the guy that needs to get the shit kicked out of him with psilocybin.
I love it.
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. There are some people that can do that stuff, right? Yeah. Who can breathe and get themselves there. I'm just not it. I need the plants to go. Right. To smash me into nothingness.
So you mentioned like with kids, like how do we do that with kids? How do we bring resilience to kids? And I think you nailed it, man. The thing that we've been trying to do is exactly that. Give experiences kind of in a controlled environment. Yep. Mm-hmm. Take Tyler on these backpacking trips. Last year we took him up to where I went camping as a kid and left him on an island for 24 hours. Hey, see you tomorrow. Yeah. Things like that. And
with his go bag.
With his go bag, yeah. And the first course of yours he did, I think he was 14.
Yeah, he was 14.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of kids coming through your classes?
I see a lot of kids coming through the classes that are about that age or just come through with their dad. I've never had one come through with his mom, but I had a father-daughter combo that came through. His Blackwater contract, and his little girl was about 14, 15, that's something cool. Like that. And everybody's like, well, watching their profanity and stuff like that. And finally, he just said, hey, look, guys, just treat her like you would fucking everybody else. Mm-hmm. And he said, fucking everybody else. We're like, okay.
All right, cool.
Yeah. And no, we've had that happen a fair bit. I mean, more than I can count.
And how do you think their emotional resilience compares to the other adults in the class? Do you think it's better, worse? Like, do you think there's a comparison?
I think those kids at that moment with their parents are amazingly resilient. Mm-hmm. They're more physically and emotionally resilient than many adults in the class. It's interesting to watch. I remember this one we're teaching a class in I think it was Nick's son. It was Nick Delgadillo's son. We're doing an EWO, and it was an outdoor EWO in Texas, and it was like austere. So it's hard class anyway. Mm-hmm. There's no air conditioning, climate control, anything. We're out there knife fighting in the woods, and he gets busted like under the helmet, and it rocks and it takes him off of his feet, right? And we're like, oh, we just broke that kid, But he springs back up, get the helmet off of him, and it's like that scene in Fight Club when his teeth are bleeding, and he's like, kind of does the bloody monkey thing when Edward Norton does the bloody monkey thing in the, in the boardroom, and he was just grinning, his just mouthful of blood. It was like, he's like, get a picture. I was like, let's get a picture.
Very cool.
Stop the class, got a picture with him and Nick.
Nice.
But they are, man. The kids that come to class, and it's a selection thing. Right? It's like, okay, he's doing well in this environment, but is this environment doing well for him? Mm-hmm. Was he just like this? I don't know. I haven't had enough, kids in class to know, well, the class made him better, or but they all kind of, the ones that come with their folks, they really rise. I would say as a demographic, I think that the young teens that do come to a ShivWorks class with their parents are probably arguably the most resilient.
I think there has to be some pre-selection, though, because, even if somebody looks at some of the videos of your classes, it's I have no doubt it scares a lot of people away,
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
which is appropriate.
They email. They literally email and say, "I was thinking about doing this class, and then I watched a video, and I'm interested in your training, but this looks scary." I'm like, it's scary looking. I agree with you. It's scary looking. I can tell you, we don't get people hurt. You know,
Well, James has to shame people. You know, he knows police officers who are like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, my
wife's done 4 of these.
yeah, yeah. That's a whole nother thing. We were talking about that in the we have a chat going with all the guys that taught at the Combative Summit, and you know the question always comes about, and somebody even we did a round robin with all the instructors at the Combative Summit, and the question came up, well, how do we get more law enforcement officers training? And dude, I've been fielding that question literally for 32 years, since 1992, when I started teaching cops, you know, and you're not going to motivate. You're not going to motivate anybody. You're not.
People have to be self-driven.
They have to. If they like it and they're interested in it, they'll do it. You can pull every trick. You can make it free. You can make it accessible. You can make it less scary. You can make it more scary. And if they don't like it and they don't want to do it and they're not interested in it, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. There's no way for me to. So it was funny. Rob Mago, who's a career police officer in Connecticut. I think he's a third degree BJJ black belt. Good guy. Think the world of Rob. Real police, right? Rob said, you know, my thing when cops ask about it right out of the gate, I just tell them it's probably not for you.
I love it.
And he said it's weird because it actually has an opposite effect. What do you mean it's not for me? I'm just telling you, man, it's probably not for you.
That's awesome.
It's probably not for you. It's probably not your thing. I'll
That's
just
great.
let you know right now. What do you mean it's not my thing? I hadn't even tried it. Yeah, I know. I don't think you're going to try it. And if you try it, I don't think you're going to stick with it. So that's why I'm saying.
That's beautiful.
Well, you know, and it's funny. It'll at least that approach seems to at least get them in the door more. You know, they may not stay, but I was like, huh. He just mentioned that the other day. I was like, that's brilliant, man. That really is. But right off the bat, he's immediately dismissive. He's just like, yeah, it's not for you.
That's awesome. I think everyone has their own reason for why they would want to come to a class.
Sure.
And I think a lot of folks come because they've been through something. They've been through a hard thing in their life, and they want to either regain physical skills or that self-confidence. And I imagine you see a lot of people come through that have, you know, were rape victims or...
More often than not, there's trauma involved.
Yeah.
More often than not. It's like, why are you coming to this class, right? There's some reason you're coming, right? You're paying, you know, $750 plus travel. You know, you got $1,500 invested in a weekend between everything.
Right.
What's going? And it's interesting to see trauma
when
is
you
a common driver.
when you see people in an evolution, and for those watching, an evolution is like the test at the end of a subject matter. Like, do we pressure test the subject matter to see if it works? And maybe they are beginning to re-experience some of that trauma. Do you see that often?
Yes.
And how do you see that manifesting? And what would your advice be to someone watching who might think about jumping in for those reasons?
So we do a really good job of reading you in the moment and understanding now's the time to stop, and then having the ability to immediately give you space and support to deal with what you just walked out of and to watch other people. And I'm not a therapist. All of this, is intuition, gut, pattern recognition, which I'm off the charts on the MMPI. Brian and I were just having this conversation the other day, and we were doing a class in Massachusetts, and Ian, we had a guy, and he was struggling. He was right on the edge, and boom, pulled him out. And Ian asked us, Ian Davis, we like him a lot. He's the guy that does all the HEMA stuff and has written a couple of books about basically 14th and 15th century.
Oh, yeah, I saw the interview with him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Neat guy. Ian said, why then? And how did you know that was the moment? I still don't really have an answer for that other than I know, right? Because I've done at this point, did the numbers here a year and a half ago, something like that. So it's up from then. At this point, I think I've personally conducted and witnessed about 60,000 simulated entangled gunfights.
Wow.
About 60,000 over 22 years. So I just know, but it's not enough. Now the question's brought up, well, how do you know?
Right.
It's like, shit, what am I seeing? How do I know when to grab a person? That's one of my big things with Brian about teaching him and forcing him to learn more empathy, right? Because he wasn't particularly empathetic when I got him. He's a lot better now, and he's a quick study, and he's light years ahead of where he was. And
He's an amazing guy.
He is an amazing guy. He really is. He's a worthy successor to me. He is, which he will be.
I'm really happy to see him on board, man.
Yeah, I am too. It took a long time to find him, right? I mean, 21 years to find Brian. He's only been on 2 years. He's been with me. But, that Ian asked us that question, what specifically am I looking at that tells me now that's the time to pull that guy or girl? Or even moreover, how do I know that now I can send in another person because they can handle an additional point of friction, or they're right. If I add any other stimuli right now, or I let this go for 30 seconds longer, it's going to harm them more than help them. It's just enough. How do I know? We're still unpacking that. We're still unpacking that. I can say that we are experts in it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and that's honest, right?
Yeah.
That's still. I mean, there's still so much, man, of this stuff that we're figuring out. I mean, it's been 2 more years after this year's over. 2 more years we'll have the silver anniversary, the 25-year mark of doing this.
It's amazing.
It's a long time. It's longer than I spent in law enforcement. Learned a lot, and we're still learning. Right. That was another big thing about bringing Brian on board. All this shit was just in my head. Now, right, it manifests because it becomes external. So it becomes
That's right.
real, something actionable. It's not really actionable in my head. So, we're figuring that one out. But we have people, as far as your question, what would I say to somebody? We have people, more than one, fair bit. We have people who say, these are their words, not mine, who say that ShivWorks coursework and continued exposure to the coursework did for them what decades of therapy and pharmaceuticals could not do.
I believe that.
It gave them a sense of control. It gave them a sense of resilience. It gave them a sense of accomplishment, a sense of belonging, a shared experience that they could talk about in ways that they couldn't talk about, in a group setting. It was, and bringing that, carrying some of that stuff that they can't talk about, maybe out with them a little bit more, and everybody understanding, I've been there too. It's potent. It really is. Yeah. It's potent. It's as, I didn't have the insight when I started this, because it was just about me figuring out how I'd fuck this up, and I'm never going to let this happen again. Yeah. So I had the insight to realize, what I was doing at the time, which is my own therapy, but then it became everybody else's, and now it's by design, a course of instruction and an experience. And it's the potency of the experience that makes cellular level changes, right? It does.
It really does. We've brought numerous friends to ShivWorks classes in the past few years, and we've actually now started to warn them, you're going to go through 5 days of deep self-reflection and doubt and reliving this over and over again. And that's good. That's what you're supposed to do. Yep. That's part of the transformation that happens when you go through one of these experiences. And it's been universally true from everyone that we've brought.
Yep. And just the weight of that and how it sits on you. It's like, well, okay, I can't quit doing this. I'm not going to quit doing this. I'll probably go break and just kill over. That's how I'll go. But the importance of the body of work and our community and what it does, and just the overwhelming positive things that happen with people. I can't stop doing this. I'll do this till I die.
It's amazing. It's masterful.
So we were at a course recently with a good friend, and with you, and you said something during one of the evolutions. So the guy had a bad head position. You said, "Hey, it's like driving. You got to look where you want to go," and you were talking about the physical position of how to organize his body for what he was trying to accomplish. That thought stuck with me, and I've been chewing on it since then. And there's such a huge corollary between that concept and just a life application.
Yep.
I've done a handful of driving classes, nothing like this guy did, but we always were taught, as you're doing your emergency driving, you always look at the end of the corner. If you look at the cones, you're going to hit the cones. Yep. You got to look at where you want to be. And man, that is so true for life. If someone is stuck in their spot where they are now, they're facing something hard, they're facing a challenge. You've got a student that, was a rape victim, or someone's facing a catastrophic diagnosis. If they're focusing on where they are now, they're just going to hit the fucking curb.
Yep.
You got to look at where you want to be.
Yeah.
You got to stay focused and keep driving ahead. That focus has been, I think, what's been keeping me going. Yeah. I want to look at where I want to be.
Yeah.
I want to look at my success. I'm going to look at the example I want to be down the road. And that whether you meant it or not, that little snippet of advice to our friend, man, that has really been chewing on my mind. So thank you for that.
No, absolutely. And I think that, and also making sure you're around the right people. Mm-hmm. I think that's, somebody told me a smart guy too, told me that you're a composite of the 5 people you spend the most time with, something like that. I think, I'll be honest with you, through my, major medical issues, not as major as yours, it's been tough, and I'm like, well, James is not sitting around feeling fucking sorry for himself, and it is absolutely the way you face this, has been like, fuck, can't let that guy down, it has. So it's like, all right, well, not going to quit on him. He's not quitting on himself. He's not quitting on me.
We'll not go gently into that good night.
Nope. I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to
Absolutely.
And that's just, it has been. That's been the way you've comported yourself throughout this. It has been, Brian and I both have been like, my dude's fucking inspiring, man. He really is. So he actually, that guy's fucking ShivWorks right there, man. He is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. Yep. It's been fairly amazing to watch, and it does. It sets an example, right? A very real example, right? And here's the thing, man. It's easy to get it on for a weekend, right? It's easy to get along for a weekend and then go your separate ways. But then when you're by yourself, nobody else is around. You're not surrounded by other people. You're just alone with your thoughts, right? That's when all the doubt and the weakness and all of it creeps in.
Yeah.
It just chips away.
Yeah.
You know this better than I do, So,
But I think it's universal.
I think it is too, and I think that's one of the many values of this community. I'm like, I don't know a whole bunch of people I can probably talk to right now. Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah.
Who will listen to me, who will give me their time and their engagement, if I want it. So, and people who are just good stewards for the ethos that we collectively hold, right?
That's right.
It's like, I probably need to act more like James. That's happened more than once.
Man, I'm honored by that.
Yeah,
I really am.
Absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
I struggle.
Yep.
There's moments, just like you said, I'm human too. I have hard days.
Yeah.
But I know those hard days come, and I know they're going to go, and I have to look at where I want to go.
Yeah.
I have to look at the end of that corner.
Yeah.
And move on, process what I'm thinking, and just, all right. Like you told me back in January when I kind of was diagnosed, but before I officially was,
right.
Jess had kind of told me what she thought was going on. You said, all right, man, just keep one foot in front of the other.
Yep.
Just keep marching forward.
Yep.
And that advice has been more helpful on more occasions than you know.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And now you're looking beyond the curve, right? You got beyond 1 foot, 1 foot in front of the other. And that's that model. And here's the thing, man, it's easy to say the words, right, when you're not the one in it. It's easy to say that shit. And then all of a sudden when it's on you, it's like, fuck, I said that. And this guy's living it. I can't live my own advice, I gotta rise up to my own good advice. So yeah, it's been and I like that. I like that self-policing group.
It's a good thing.
It's an incredibly positive just by good behavior and modeling how it's an ascendant community, I think, and it's special. And it can do things, right? It really can. So I believe in it. I do believe in us.
And to that point, I'm not this way because of just me. I have an amazing community.
Yep.
There's so many people that have reached out and helped us, and man, I would not be in the same position I am now if it wasn't for the people that have surrounded themselves around me, and I've surrounded myself with. It's the truth.
And people throw that word around, community, right? Well, we need to be more active in our community, and most of the time it's lip service, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like lip service with the ShivWorks community.
That's absolutely right.
And I think because of this shared potent experience that we all have in common, right? This very public demonstration of vulnerability. That's the buy-in.
That's right.
So everybody has to do it, right? Because you're not part of the community. If you set the evolutions out,
right.
You'll kind of be on the periphery of it, but you're not really invested in the community like everybody else is. And the struggle I think the ascendance, the attempt, trying, not going gracefully into that. I think that's really what makes us a community. I really do.
It's earned.
Yeah, it is.
And you have to pay up.
Yeah, and you have to pay up. You have to pay up. That's the homeowners association fee for the neighborhood.
Well, it is getting super late, man.
Yeah.
And
We go as long as you want or as short as you want. I don't care.
man, I could talk to you for 2 days.
I know. We could. Everybody be like, all right, when is this guy's going to shut up?
God.
Yeah.
I do
right,
have
enough
I do
already.
have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Of course.
And you talked a little, you kind of gave like this, high level overview of like when you were growing up, and you started to go down this road where you could have ended up in jail.
I had 3 felonies on me specifically when I was 14 years old:
Wow.
burglary, grand larceny, and possession of automatic weapons. Neighbor was a Vietnam veteran. Took a bunch of young ne'er-do-wells under his belt and showed us the AK-47s and Russian PPSH-43 machine gun and the Browning 50 cal.
And like
brought
what
back
teenage boy wouldn't be like, yes.
Brought back from Vietnam, and then they left on a family trip, and we did a bunch of cocaine, broke in, and took those guns because we were. And then one of the kids that were on the burglary snitched and opened us all up, and we all got arrested. So, yeah, that was a thing.
So what drove you to go into law enforcement?
So that period of time, I got in trouble. Went to live with my dad in South Florida. It got even worse. I didn't have any more charges, but the crowd I was running with in North Miami Beach was bad. It was a bad crowd, really bad, violent criminals. And my dad and my mom came together for the first time, and my grandfather made a collective decision. We've got to do something with him. And they sent me, and I had a friend who had gone to this military school, Marion Military Institute, Marion, Alabama. And he was a fellow juvenile delinquent. He loved it, and I hated everything. So I'm like, maybe that sounds like a good idea. So we were having this big family meeting. I was like, well, Steve Grant went to this military school. And they were like, yes. So they got me out of that environment, real rigid. I mean, it was, there are consequences for everything. You had a basic, you had a demerit system, and you get demerits for everything. Your bunk that is not, if the guy couldn't come in and measure with a dollar bill, three bills, 18 inches long from the top of the bunk down to your double rolled blanket and sheet, that's a demerit. If there's water in your sink, it's not dried out, that's a demerit. The hangers weren't spaced, that's a demerit, And then when you got like 10 demerits, that was a PT, and a PT is a penalty tour, and a penalty tour is 30 minutes worth of marching in full dress uniform on the weekends. So, everything was, and you got demerits for everything. Being late to class, not having your shoes shine, not having your collar pressed. It was rigid, and there were consequences for everything. And it was run pretty much by the kids. So it was a 4-year high school and a 2-year college. And the kids in the 4-year high, it's no longer a high school anymore. Apparently, it's just a 2-year college now. But when I was there, it was a 4-year high school, 2-year college, and the kids were the enlisted and the non-commissioned officers, and the college students were the officers. So it was run like a
Interesting.
Yeah, it was run. So you had freshmen and sophomores in college, and it was a 2-year military college that you got a commission for at the end of that, and then you had to go do 2 years somewhere else. But a lot of those guys ended up, they'd do like 2 years there, and then they would go to a service academy.
Sure.
So they would go to West Point or Annapolis or something like that. We had a bunch who went to West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy too. A lot. old prestigious, I think 1857 is one of the schools. Beautiful grounds, you know, old Southern, very pompous circumstance. Proper military ball. There's a girls' college in that little Alabama town at the time of 3,000 people.
Wow.
Judson College was a very, very significant Southern girls' college. But anyway, I went to my last 2 years of high school were there, and then I decided I want to go in the Army. I want to freaking, you know.
Good, easy transition.
Yeah, I wanted to kill a bad man in a good fight, right?
Yeah.
So do something with all this anger. It was a positive outlet for it. So I went in, and between those 5 years, I kind of like got out of more, pretty much had the criminality knocked out of me, and then I came home, and I started bouncing, and I was originally going to use my Army college money, which I did, to get a 4-year degree and go back into or go into intelligence work, go work for the intelligence community. And I started working at a bar. I was a bouncer for like 6 months, and then an opening, they needed part-time help at the jail, at the county jail. My grandfather was a local law enforcement legend who everyone had worked for that was in the administration at the sheriff's department. So my mother was also working for the sheriff's department. So it's like, hey, think Craig would be interested in doing this? You know? So I hired on, and then I was part-time for a couple of months, and then went full-time after that. So I was a full-time correctional officer, and then I was going to college full-time too. So that's all I did. I went to college, I worked, and I trained. That's all I did for the next four years. And it just turned into, and again, there was no intention to do a law enforcement career, but this is pre-pepper spray days, right, in the county jail. So 1990, and I mean, it was just us and them, and if things got bad, we had 36-inch pieces of hickory and then shotguns. So you had to use your hands.
Yeah.
You know. And I remember I choked an inmate unconscious, and the other correctional officers thought that was magic. Thought I'd killed the guy, you know, and woke him up and everything, and he was in cuffs. They're like, man, can you teach us how to do that? So teaching people in the jail how to choke other inmates out for a year eventually led, in addition to working, eventually led to them saying, hey, you want to go to a defensive tactics instructor school?
Wow.
So that's what got me to the DT instructor school, and that was at the police academy. And police academy, they asked me to come on as an adjunct, and that's what started. And that's what started me formally training law enforcement in 92. And it was you know, I got my degree. I got my degree in East Asian Studies with a minor in Japanese, because the big push at the time was, hey, the economic threat of Japan is huge, you know, and I think Michael Crichton had written that book, Rising Sun, so it was like they're gonna, like, you know, steal all our shit.
Yeah.
So that's what everybody said to do, and so I did it, you know. But I had gotten so heavily involved in law enforcement, and as importantly, probably more importantly, law enforcement training was just so bad, and it was bad then, and I fought it being bad, and I made it better, markedly so, that between that and then getting into dope work, you know, operationally, and that 2-year time, I just did a career.
It's awesome.
Did a career. Just, again, I wish I could say that I planned my life, but I haven't.
That's how it works, though.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's some people that do plan their life. Doctors generally plan their lives, right? You ask a doctor, hey, when did you know you were going to be a doctor? When I was 9 years old, you know, and I got out, and got my undergrad, went to pre-med, blah, 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 this is, you know, or a specialist, right? Like a heart surgeon. They'll tell you, I knew then. So those people certainly do plan their lives, but that's not me. I just, kind of the same way I bought drugs, just by the seat of my pants, following my gut. Doesn't feel good. Not going to do it. This feels good. I'm going to do it, and that's, for the most part, that's served me well and has allowed me to ascend. So, so that's the story, really. I mean, of how I stayed out of jail. But I mean, I could just as easily been on the other side of this badge. I've been described by more than one person as a law-abiding bad guy. There's truth to that. There is. I don't say that with pride or shame.
It's just honesty.
It's factual.
Yeah.
It's factual. But yeah, I could have just as easily. I mean, honestly, if I would have stayed in South Florida, yeah, I would have.
You wouldn't be the same person.
I would have caught a charge. Probably gone inside. Probably affiliated. And then once I'm affiliated, I'm going to have this. Then I'll probably made a career of it.
Yeah.
And that was your environment. You were surrounded by that environment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it too. Crime. I mean, people are like, why do people commit crime? It's simple crime.
It's exhilarating.
Fucking fun. It's awesome. It is. Stealing shit,
The adrenaline. Yeah, it's exhilarating.
Do you know how many people in SOCOM have and if you...
It's the same
mindset.
Yeah.
There are so many people in SOCOM who come from horrendous, troubled, criminal backgrounds. I tell you what, I mean, the 80s Ranger Regiment, those were a bunch of fucking felons, man.
Yeah.
They were.
It's the same environment, just legalized.
Yeah, it's a place to put those people and focus.
And they thrive on it.
Yeah, they thrive on it, right? And certainly back then, it's different now, though, right? I mean, I talked to kids. We did me and Scotty did a car fighting gig for the regiment for RRC a few years ago, and talking to them, I'm like, wow, they're super fit. They're way bigger than we were back then. We were just eyeballs and calves, from road march. And now they're all jacked.
Yeah.
But they're also like oddly sweet. It's like we weren't sweet. They're like, yeah, now you get a bar fight now. I'll throw you out of the regiment. I'm like, fuck, you couldn't stay.
That was a prerequisite before.
You couldn't stay in the regiment unless you were in a bar fight. It's interesting how the worm turns. I'm sure that'll, we'll see what happens. But I think it's definitely there's no doubt it's a healthier place. There's no doubt it's a healthier place.
Sure.
And I think they've learned some lessons, on good leadership. We'll see. And better as well as I do, better than I do, because you run longer, how cyclical the military is. They forget all those lessons learned from the previous war. They have to fucking relearn them. So that was a long answer. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Thoroughly or not?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have a proudest moment in ShivWorks?
In ShivWorks, proudest moment?
Or in your training path? Is there something that stands out as like, man?
Like personally, something I'm proud.
We're proud of a student, or just for you, when you think of like over your career, man, that's the moment I'm the proudest of. Either something that
I think it would be probably the one girl who told me that ShivWorks training did for her what 15 years of therapy and drugs couldn't do. That's probably the proudest moment. And you guys know her, so there you go.
Yeah,
it's probably the one.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah, more than any other, that one. And awesome. Wasn't even trying to do that or had any idea that's what it would do. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, man.
Of course, you always have it.
I appreciate it. And I'm honored by it.
You always have it. You'll always have it first. All you got to do is ask. So I appreciate you, Jess. I appreciate you. Thanks for inviting me in your home. It's awesome. Love this place. Homie. It's very homey.
I don't know if that's a compliment.
No, it is.
I
It's
take it as a
absolutely
compliment. It's
absolutely
well
compliment.
lived in.
Yeah, there's a difference between a house and a home. This is home.
Yeah.
Right. This
It
home.
is.
Yeah.
And you didn't even get to meet the chickens.
I didn't meet the chickens. I'll meet
too
them
dark
next.
outside.
I'll meet 'em
There's-
yeah, we'll meet them next time.
They're sleeping.
Met the pups. But yeah, we'll do it next time.
So for those of you guys who are following along, Craig, where can they follow you at? Where can they see you?
So we have an Instagram page that Brian runs, ShivWorks _official, I believe is that. And then I have a personal Instagram page, South Narc. We have a Facebook group, and then of course the website, ShivWorks.com. So that's where the training schedule is at. And then ShivWorks Products Group is all the products. So if you just Google ShivWorks, you'll land on it. We've spent money on as CO and all that shit. So
Perfect.
We've got smart people that do that. So yeah.
So if you guys are interested in what Craig does, check him out. I'll tell you firsthand, I'm biased, but I love it. And I've been to many of the classes. There's a few I haven't been to that I'm going to try to get my way into.
Got to get you into a VCast. Have you had a VCast?
I haven't had a VCast
Got to
or
get you a VCast.
an
And we got to
Amos.
do an Amos.
Yeah.
Up here is where we typically do the Amoses in Western PA.
Well, we'll have to look for that then.
Yeah. Sean usually finds a spot. Usually a good spot too, man. Like an old dilapidated resort.
That's perfect.
We had one that looked like the Outlook Hotel one year in frickin' The Shining. Man, it was totally creepy.
That's awesome.
Going around those corners like those two little girls are going to be here. They're going to freak everybody out here in just a second, man. So yeah, we'll talk about that this weekend, man. Cool. Gear one up.
Any parting thoughts?
Nope. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wife's time. I appreciate your audience's time, and just glad to be, over the hill rather than in the hill.
Perfect. All right, guys. So that's what we have for today. Remember to do the like thing and the subscribe thing. And until next time, make today great. That one there.
Okay.
Okay.
Look over
All
there.
right.
Yeah, we're looking at that. The one that's under, yes, under the light.
The one when you're looking into the sun.
Got it. Yeah.
You're going to do the intro.
Okay. I forget what I'm supposed to say.
Welcome to Unbroken from the Ashes.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
All right.